Hey everyone, it's Brandy and welcome back to my channel, Brandy Janae's Bookshelf. As you can tell from the title of this video, today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read during the second half of the month, or I guess during the second half of August. If you haven't already seen my wrap up for the first half of August, I talked about 10 books in that video, and here are some of those books. These are all the physical books from that first half that I have read. But before I get into all of the books that I read and my opinions on those, I just wanted to go through my stats for the entire month of August. So in August I read a total of 24 books, and I did DNF one book. If you haven't seen that mid-month wrap up for August, I read a total of 8,061 pages, and that is including what I read of the book that I DNF'd. And as far as my rating for the month, I had a 3.92. In this video I have 14 books to talk about. I'm gonna try to keep it concise so it's not too long. As always, I'm going to talk about these books going from my lowest rated to my highest rated. So the first 3-star read I have to talk about is The Demon Prince of Momochi House, Volume 2 by Aya Shoto. Like I said, I gave this one 3 stars. I'm not going to talk too much about this one because I did talk a little bit more about the storyline in my mid-month wrap-up when I read Volume 1, so you can go check that out. That was one of the first books that I talked about in that video as well. For the most part, this is a continuation of Volume 1 with a little bit more progress into the overall story arc. We do get to see a few new characters, and we get to see some of the characters, or a character that had appeared before, be upgraded from like a minor character to somewhat of a major character by the end of this one, and I'm sure that character is going to play a bigger role. But besides that, this didn't really stray too much from what you would have expected from the second volume. I gave this one 3 stars because, like I said, there wasn't a whole lot of extra going on. I think it was cute. I'm interested in the storyline, but it's not one that I feel like I need to pick up as soon as I get, as soon as I have the ability to get the next volume. I think that I'm just gonna pick this one up as I feel like reading it, because it's not bad, but it's not super exciting. The next 3-star read that I have is Snow White with the Red Hair, Volume 1 by Sarada Akiduki. I don't know, that sounds weird. This one is basically a retelling following a girl named Shirazuki, I believe is how you say it, which is this character that's on the main cover. She was born with hair like the same shade of red as an apple, which is a constant theme that's mentioned at the beginning of every chapter. And because of the color of her hair, she draws a lot of attention her way. So in the very beginning, she ends up gaining the attention of the prince of her kingdom. He sends basically his right hand man, or is somebody that's under him. He sends him to go let this girl know, like, because of your hair, you're going to be the prince's next concubine. And she doesn't want anything to do with that, so she decides to cut off her hair, go in disguise, and run away into the woods in the next kingdom over from hers in order to escape this prince. There she runs into this boy named Zen along with 2 others, and kind of ends up explaining her situation. Also lets him know that she's an herbalist and she has to convince him that she's not trying to poison him, all of these other things. And they end up having this friendship, but it's clear to see that this boy Zen kind of has a crush on her and wants possibly something romantic to happen at some point. It turns out that this boy Zen is actually the second prince in his own kingdom, and he uses his power in order to help her get away from the prince that is trying to claim her as his concubine, and he ends up coming to her rescue in other situations throughout this book as well. I think that this is a cute story. However, I think this is one, like I said with the previous manga that I talked about, it's not super exciting. This is another one that kind of follows the same plot each chapter, and I like my mangas to kind of progress with each chapter, especially considering that these are really short, and because of that it gets really repetitive really fast. and it's almost like borderline on the type of manga that I don't like to read. I'm just not fully convinced with this first volume alone. I would like to read more to see how the story progresses, to see if I would like to continue on with the series. It has potential, I will say that, but this wasn't necessarily my favorite. And the final 3-star book that I have to talk about in this video is One Day in December by Josie Silver. So this book is a dual perspective story, romance. Is this considered romance? I think it's technically considered like women's fiction, but there is an underlying romance throughout the entire story. So the story opens up and we're following Glory, who we followed throughout the majority of this book. She's actually on the bus on her way home from work. It's pretty close to the holidays and it's either her last day of work for the holidays or she has like a couple days left. And I think she works at a hotel or something like that, and she's just really unhappy. But she, like I said, she's on the bus and the bus stops to obviously pick up some people at one of the stops. And outside she sees this guy who's reading a book, and he so happens to look up and they make a connection, and they like, you can tell that they have some type of instant connection just by seeing each other. And she's willing him to get on this bus so they can actually meet. But by the time the guy makes the decision to try to get on the bus, it ends up pulling off. So she misses the opportunity to meet him. And for the next year, she spends all of her time trying to find this guy. And then they're both surprised because her friend has been talking about this new guy that she basically kind of forced into asking her out. And she's been hearing all these things about this amazing guy for the past couple months, I believe. And he comes to their holiday party the next year, and they both realize like, hey, that's that person from the bus stop. And they both kind of make this unconscious decision not to tell her best friend Sarah that they kind of know each other because they met, you know, when they saw each other. Or they didn't really meet, but you know, they kind of met when they, like I said, when they saw each other at this bus stop. And it goes on for years where they don't say anything to this friend, and they're kind of battling this attraction that they have to each other. And it's a bunch of other things that happens, and I believe this book takes place over like 10 years, which I definitely wasn't expecting going into this. And we're kind of just following the two of them in their ins and outs of life and how certain things happen. And I'm not really going to get into too much more than that because I don't want to spoil this. So I will say I went into this book expecting not to like this at all, especially because there are themes of cheating, both emotional and like kind of actually cheating. I know that it happens, but it's not something that I necessarily enjoy reading about, especially in this type of situation. I wasn't really expecting to like this going into it, and I didn't end up loving it. I think that the cheating had a big deal to do with that, especially considering that they both had multiple opportunities to like just fess up and say, hey, this was that person. And it took away from the fact that it was clear that these two had this connection that they probably should have just explored, but they kept letting the opportunity pass them by, or it just kept being the exact wrong time for it to happen. And instead of like talking to significant others when they realized that things weren't exactly how they thought they were, they let it continue on until it like ruined relationships, including friendships. And it was just like, it was frustrating because I know sometimes that's how life is, and for that aspect of it, I think the author did a really good job of capturing how little mistakes can lead to bigger problems. So for that, it did a really good job. But I just found it so frustrating because I was just like, they knew how they felt, but they kept fighting it and fighting it. And I was just like, why put these people around you in this pain when you guys could have just like talked to the other person? It was just it was really frustrating. I think that's the best way to explain how I felt while reading this. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it, which is why I gave it 3 stars. Like, I don't know if I would ever reread this, but I actually enjoyed it more than I thought I was when I went into it. The next book that I have to talk about is the only one that I gave 3.5 stars, and that is The Right Swipe by Alicia Rye. This one is another dual perspective, but this one is actually a romance following Rhiannon and Samson. Before the story starts, the two of them actually met through a dating app, which is actually the dating app that the main female character created. They have a one-night stand, and Samson convinces Rhiannon to meet him again the next day, but he never shows up. Basically, he ghosted her, and because of that, she was just like, I don't want to have anything to do with him. You know, there's no excuse for that at all. If he didn't want to go, he should have just said so. And because of that, she completely cuts him off. You know, she matches him on her app, and like just pretty much makes it where he has no way of contacting her at all. And then the story opens up, she is at this, like, she's kind of snuck her way into this party for one of her competitors, and she finds out that this guy is actually working with her competition, and she kind of freaks out because she's just like, what is he doing here? Because they're back in the same circle, he kind of is trying to talk to her to try to explain what happened. She's not having it. She's just like, I don't want to talk to you at all. But they end up working together on this project, and she agrees to have a physical relationship with him, but nothing else. But as you can expect, especially with the romance novel, obviously things progress past that point. Opposite to the last book, I went into this expecting to love it. I was really excited about a diverse novel from a diverse author about a Black female main character in tech, especially because I've been considering going back to school to get in some type of tech, like going for computer science to eventually get in the tech business, possibly. I don't know if I want to do that for sure, but it has been a possibility. But not only do we have a Black female main character, but we have something other than a white male main character. But like I said, I was really excited for it for those reasons. However, this one ended up not being as great as I wanted it to, mainly because of our character Rhiannon. She was really closed off, and she was all about having this hard front, not letting anything get to her, and I feel like that was a detriment to the story. I appreciated that we got a little bit more into the details of a Black woman in the tech field, and not only that, but her owning her own company and what certain situations that have happened in her past, how that has affected her, as opposed to how a similar situation wouldn't affect a white male in the same position as she's in. However, I did not appreciate the fact that she really didn't have any moments to be vulnerable in the story. There were a few moments here and there, but I felt like as far as the romance, like, she didn't really open up to the main male lead. Like I said, this is a dual perspective, so we switch back and forth between Samson and Rhiannon, and we get to see a little bit of a softer side on Samson's end, which was a little bit different because usually it's the man who's all hard and doesn't want to deal with anything. So it's nice seeing a bit of a dynamic change when it came to that. However, I feel like the majority of the book she was so focused on presenting herself a certain way that she didn't allow herself to fully open up to the main male character, and I think that because of that, the romance progressed kind of quickly. I get having a physical attraction, and I get that them having that sexual encounter before played a big role in it, but I feel like obviously, especially when it comes to a strict romance novel, there's more to relationship than sex, and that seemed to be about 95% of the relationship that we got between the two characters in this book, and I didn't appreciate that. So as far as this book and my expectations for it, I wasn't completely happy. I gave it 3.5 stars. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't like the best thing I ever read when it comes to the actual romance. So first of the 4-star reads is The Kingdom by Jess Rothenberg, and I swear this book took me like a month to read. I kept putting it down and not picking it up for long stretches of time. So from the time I started to the time I finished was like almost, I think it was like 25 days. This book is set in the Kingdom, which is the title of the book, and the Kingdom is basically an immersive fantasy theme park. The only difference is that all of the characters in the park and all of the animals that are displayed, which is a big part of their displays, or at least from the perspective that we see, all of those are android hybrids. This company that owns the kingdom, or created the kingdom, however that works, they use different strains of DNA and, like I said, combine them with androids in order to recreate animals that have gone extinct. And they also have the Fantasses, which are the princesses of the kingdom, which is one of the characters that's on the front of the book, which I'm guessing this is our main character named Anna, who is a Fantasses. And from the opening of the story, it seems that she is on trial for murder, and it's almost a question of whether or not she was able to do that, since she is supposed to be a machine. And it's just like, does she have the ability to commit murder, or was this programmed into her system and, you know, somebody else kind of did that? Or at least that's what I thought going into it. So this one kind of takes place on a dual timeline of sorts. So part of it is looking back from a certain point leading up to the trial, and then we also flash between those times and then the trial. And I believe part of it is after, like, an interview after the trial. I really can't get into this book without spoiling anything, so I'm not. Just know that I actually really enjoyed this. Although this is a sci-fi, I feel like this was more of a mystery. It was pretty much trying to figure out who done it. Honestly, for us, it was figuring out also who got killed, why it was done, and how it was done. And then things like ended up getting turned on its head anyway, and things that you thought were happening were not the way you thought they were. And it's kind of crazy, and I'm just gonna leave it at that. I know I probably sound really confusing, but this was so good. And I honestly am kind of beating myself up for taking so long to read it, because I felt like if I would have read it all at one time, I probably would have ended up giving this 5 stars. But because I dragged it out, I feel like it wasn't as exciting. And then I kind of spoiled myself with parts, because I was just like, what's actually going on? I was just like, who's actually dead? I was really confused. And then there were some other little things thrown in, and yeah, but this was really good. And from the way that this ended, it seems like there is at least going to be one other book, so I can't wait to read that and figure out how it's all going to go. I really hope there's another book. Like, it doesn't need to be one, but it seems like there could be, because there's like more stuff that the character is like, I need to get this done. So yeah, if you guys like Disney and murder and trying to figure out the mystery, I suggest you guys pick this one up, because it was a good one. Next, I have Midnight Secretary Volume 3. Yes, Volume 3 by Tomu Omi. Not really going to get into too many details about this, but another one that I gave 4 stars. Realistically, this would probably be like a 3.5 star read, because there were some questionable things that was in this specific volume of the manga. I think for like nostalgia purposes, because this is one of my favorite series, I can't really, like, I can lower it, but I don't really want to lower my rating, because I am enjoying rereading this series and I'm looking forward to continuing on with this. However, I will say that if you're reading this for the first time, you will probably have issues with some things that go on in this book, because I was rolling my eyes at it. If you have a problem with guys being really possessive, supernatural or human, you will have an issue with this, because that was a big problem. And I was just like, he literally keeps calling, like, basically claiming ownership of her, and I was just like, dude, get over yourself. But like I said, because of my love for the series, because I read it when I was a lot younger and obviously didn't notice those things, I just, like, I can't hate it. If you're thinking about picking this up and those type of things bother you, I might suggest you not, or just be wary about that going into it. Just know that some things like that does happen. The next 4-star read I have to talk about is Wild Country by Anne Bishop. This is book 2 in her spinoff of the other series, and this book is taking place in the town known as Bennett. So I believe it's in book 3 or 4 when Bennett is first mentioned. So if you have read the other series, like Into the other series, then you will probably know which town I'm talking about. But this is taking place in that town as it is being resettled, and obviously as new people come to town, new problems come into town because of that. Yeah, I'm not really gonna get into too many details because this is kind of told along the same storyline as one of those books from the other series. I don't want to get into some of the details, but some of that is directly from that book. It's just like what was going on in this town as that was happening. I think of all the books, this was one of my least favorites. I think mainly because this book, I think it did what book 3 did in the original other series. It focused on so many different characters. I think this one focused on even more characters than that did, and I know that eventually they all do come together towards the end, but there was so much going on. I was just like, I don't know these people. I don't care enough about them to really want to know their stories, especially for the people who were doing dumb stuff that we know that they were all going to be killed in the end, because that's just the type of story that this is. As always, I feel like I end up adoring some of the characters, like especially the others. This one was a little different because the others that we do see, they aren't as inclined to like humans, especially because in the original other series we see that they start to tolerate the humans because of Meg, and because of that they end up growing fond of some of those humans that kind of centered around Meg. But in this one they have no connection. They have to learn to get along, and we have outside people teaching these humans that have never been around others before how to interact and how they think. And it was nice seeing some of those come together, and how they, like, watching them battle it out was really funny, and seeing how everything settled and how eventually they ended up caring for them, and how they were making decisions like, you know, I'm gonna do whatever I need so these people don't get killed by the elders if they decide they want to cleanse the entire town again. The majority of it I really enjoyed, but I couldn't give it a full 5 out of 5 stars because, like I said at the beginning, there were so many different perspectives that I wasn't really caring about. The next book I have is The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. Another one I gave 4 stars to. This one is following a character named Leah. It's actually like 3 different perspectives that we're following, but mainly we're following Leah. That's not her full name, but I don't feel like trying to find out how you say her full name. But at the beginning of the story we see her as she's getting prepped for her wedding. Her father actually kind of set up an arrangement with a prince from a neighboring kingdom to marry her off for a political alliance, and you know, she decides that she's not happy with, so her and her servant decide to run off to this little town that's not far from the kingdom, or maybe pretty far from the kingdom, I can't remember, and to just go live a life as a normal person. However, what she doesn't realize is that a prince and an assassin are after her, along with other people that were sent after her. If you haven't already heard of this book, which I would be shocked by because I feel like this was floating around a lot, but we also follow the perspective of the prince and the assassin that are after Princess Leah after she runs away. This was not necessarily what I was expecting. I knew this was fantasy, but I thought it was more of a political fantasy than an actual like fantasy with magical elements. Now it is mostly a political fantasy, but there are magical elements somewhat introduced into this, even though it's still kind of a skeptical thing because the main character is still kind of questioning if she has these magical abilities. That's a little interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that progresses in the next book because I was more interested in the magical abilities than the political aspect. Looking forward to book 2 and seeing how, you know, everything continues on. The next book that I finished was Fresh Ink, and this is an anthology by various authors. I gave this one 4 stars, and this was done in partnership with We Need Diverse Books, and like I said, it is an anthology of 13 short stories from different authors of various backgrounds. I think that for the most part this was a really well done anthology. All of the stories weren't my favorite, as you could probably expect from an anthology, but for the most part I really enjoyed the majority of the stories. For my overall rating, I didn't like add up all of the stars and then divide them by how many stars it would have gotten total. I just kind of gave it a 4 stars because it wasn't perfect, but I still really enjoyed it. The next one that I have to talk about is We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faisal. This is a dual perspective story following Zafira and Nasir. Zafira is our main female character. She disguises herself as a man to go hunt for food to feed the people in her town. She actually goes into these cursed woods or forest or whatever they call it. So she is the only one that can go into this cursed forest. If anyone else tries, they either go crazy or they don't come out again. And then we're also following Nasir, who is the son of the Sultan, and he's also an assassin, and he's known as the Prince of Death. The two of them become intertwined after Zafira receives an invitation to travel to this island to retrieve this artifact that will bring magic back to the lands. And Nasir is actually sent after her to go and kill her and retrieve the artifact that she was sent to find. Obviously, because she disguises herself as a man and no one realizes that she's the hunter, Nasir thinks that she's a man until, you know, situations turn where he finds out who she really is, or that she's really the hunter. And as you can expect, things progress from there. Obviously, neither of them knows the full story, and eventually they end up having to work together to fight a greater evil. Sorry if that is somewhat of a spoiler, but I figured I would just say that because you can obviously probably guess that's where the story was going. This was another book that I kind of heard mixed things about. Some people thought it was okay, some people loved it. I was kind of in the middle of most of the opinions that I saw. For the most part, I really enjoyed this, but it wasn't my new favorite book. I think this was a bit long in places because we didn't need all of the details that we got. I think some of those details added to the story, but some of them were just kind of unneeded, especially considering how much there was to cover in the story. And I think that this definitely could have benefited from being cut down in certain spots. However, I think that the plot and the characters were really well done. I really appreciated the found family. It was an interesting dynamic, but I think it came together well. And by the end of this, obviously things were not the way that they were in the beginning of the story, and I really appreciated that. Obviously, by the end of this, I can expect a sequel. Really looking forward to that, and I can't wait for that one to come out. The next one that I have to talk about is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. This book is following Elizabeth, and she is an orphan. She's actually left on the doorsteps of one of the great libraries, and instead of sending her to an orphanage, the wardens of the library decided to raise her there. So she grew up among the different grimoires which possess their own type of powers. She was taught that all sorcerers are evil because they gain their powers from demons. As you can expect, because of that, she has some type of prejudice. She also seems to have this weird ability with the grimoires, especially and it's hinted at that she has possibly gained this ability because she has grown up in the library. But because of the abilities that Elizabeth seems to have, she ends up caught in this scheme of someone, a sorcerer, to do something at these different libraries. And she is accused of killing the director of the library that she has been living and is now an apprentice at. And because of that, she is being sent off to one of the sorcerers for judgment or something like that, to face her crimes or something. And she is actually escorted by a sorcerer that she kind of fell into while she was snooping through the hidden passageways in her library. And on their way there, they come across a lot of different issues, and but eventually she is turned over to, I guess, the main sorcerer in charge or something crazy like that. And some things unexpectedly happen. She figures out some things and she's not supposed to know them, and that causes more problems for her. This book was actually pretty good. I was kind of on the fence about this one because I did read Margaret Rogerson's debut novel, An Enchantment of Ravens, and while I did enjoy that one, I felt like that one was pretty underdeveloped, and when I found out that this book was also a standalone, I was a bit worried because that one was also a standalone and I felt like it had room to improve. However, I think that she did a much better job with this book than that first book. I feel like she really took her time to explore the world, develop the characters. I will say that I wish that we got more than this one book, but I will say that this one book felt so well done. I felt like I was in the world with the character, and this was one of those weird times where I didn't mind the sort of historical setting that this book was taking place in. And it was so good. I loved the magic, the characters, how everything came together. I believed the danger that the main character was in, and I was like freaking out. I was just so invested in the story and I didn't want it to end. And then the ending, I was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. It was good. It wasn't perfect, so that's why it's in my 4-star section, but this was definitely a step up from her debut novel. The next book that I have to talk about is The Bride Test by Helen Hoang. And this is her second book in this kind of companion novel series. This book is following Kai, who doesn't make an appearance in the Kiss Quotient, and also Mai, I believe is how you say her name, but she goes by Esme when she comes to America. This is another dual perspective romance, and this one starts off following Kai 10 years in the past, and he's actually at the funeral of one of his cousins. It is discovered that he has Asperger's, but it's also stated that his family doesn't really believe in that type of thing. They just say that he's a weird kid. So when one of his aunts addresses him, I think it's actually the mother of the cousin that died, and she was just like, I thought you were closer than that, because he's not like crying at the funeral like all of the rest of his family is. He's kind of just sitting there and not really knowing how to react. And that confrontation with his aunt causes a lot of issues, and pretty much it ends up causing him to not really want to get close to anyone, because he believes that he doesn't have the ability to love or feel for anyone in any type of way. That was the prologue, and then we skip over to the beginning of the first chapter, and his mother is actually in Vietnam, and this time we're following Mai. She's currently working and cleaning the bathroom. She has these girls coming in crying, and eventually this older lady comes in and she gets to talking to her, and the woman pretty much says, hey, I want you to come and seduce my son, convince him to marry you. And she's just like, if you agree to this, I will pay for you to come to America for the summer. And she's just like, you know what, and if it doesn't work out, you can come back, no problems, blah 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 blah. But she's like, this is an opportunity for you. And Mai's just like, no. She's like, I'm not okay with that. But eventually her mother ends up talking her into it, because she's actually a single mom of a little girl, and her mom was in the same situation, and she's just like, look, you need to suck it up and do this for your daughter. This is the best opportunity that you have. So she ends up saying that she'll go, and she goes off to America to try to convince this guy to marry her so she can get her green card and, you know, stay in America so her family can also come with her. We spend the majority of the book watching the two of them get used to each other and start to figure out how to be around each other as they start to fall in love with each other. I enjoyed this book. However, I couldn't give it a full 5 stars. The main issue that I had was the secret that Esme was keeping. I felt like she had multiple opportunities to tell not only Kai but his mom, and the fact that she told Kai's brother before she told him that she had a kid, and she was kind of hoping that this could be an opportunity to not only be with Kai after she realized her feelings for him, but to also give her daughter a better opportunity. I just did not appreciate that, because that was like this big secret that she was keeping throughout the majority of the book. However, as far as a romance between Kai and Esme, or Mai, however she wants to go by, because she goes by both, I think that that part was done well. It still had pretty steamy moments. Once again, I don't know why I wasn't really expecting that, especially after reading the Kiss Quotient. Gave it 4 stars. Wasn't my favorite, mostly because of that big secret that Esme was keeping throughout the majority of the book, but I will definitely be reading the rest of the books that she puts out with characters who have appeared in this series. The second to last book that I have to talk about in this video is another reread, and that is Halfway to the Grave by Janine Frost. This one is my last 4-star read, and I reread this because of the Wicked Spirits book club. This was our book club pick for August, and we will be doing a live show, I believe, on the 15th. This one follows half vampire Catherine Crawfield, and since her 16th birthday she has been going around killing vampires. And one day she gets in over her head when she meets Master Vampire Bones, and he is going to kill her, but then he finds out that she's a half vampire after not believing her. So he pretty much sets up an arrangement that she's going to work for him, he's going to train her, and he's going to pick who they kill, and you know, they're pretty much going to work together. She's not really all that ecstatic about it, but it is between that or die. So she's just like, you know what, I'm just gonna go work for him. I'll still get to kill vampires, just a little bit more limited. Like I said, this was a reread for me. Just as the first time, I thought this is a lot of fun. It's not perfect, but I did, like I said, I had a lot of fun with it. And yeah, I forgot about all the dirty talk that was in this book. I've actually been kind of binging this series. I think I just started book 4 in between filming my TBR in this video when I was putting books up. I enjoyed this. I'm already currently in the middle of reading the rest of the original series, so I'll probably finish all those this month, but for now, read this one 4 stars. So the final book that I have to talk about, and my highest rated for August, is Aurora Rising by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is the first book in their new sci-fi series. This is more of a sci-fi fantasy compared to their first series together. This is a multi-perspective story following 7 different people, I believe. So this book starts off in Tyler's perspective, which is one of our characters, and he's actually out in, it's called the Fold, which I don't know, it's basically like a hole in space that these people in this current time use to travel between vast spaces of space in a shorter amount of time. I think it's basically like a black hole, like think of it like a black hole in any other type of sci-fi book, but they call it the Fold. But anyway, he's there, and we find out he's trying to save this girl, Aurora, who has been trapped in cryosleep for the past 2 centuries, and a whole lot of issues arise from that. So he does end up saving her, but because of that, he ends up missing the draft. And the draft is basically this competition sort of that they go through when the kids at Aurora Academy are about to graduate, and based off of the scores during this draft, they get to choose their team. But because he misses it and doesn't get to participate, he doesn't get to choose his team. 2 people that he expected to be on his team, they kind of held out for him, but the other 3, he kind of just gets the bottom of the barrel as he thinks about them. They're the ones that no one wanted, and it ends up actually working out for the best that they all end up on the team. And because Tyler saved this girl and she's kind of thrust upon them by the higher ups, they end up in a world of problems that they definitely didn't expect. That's pretty much the overall concept of this, and I feel like that is the best way to talk about that without getting into too many details, because I feel like if I start explaining more, then I'm gonna start getting into spoilers. Like I said, the main character, Aurora, is a girl who was supposed to be traveling to this new colonization, but she's been stuck in cryosleep for the past 2 centuries, and when she wakes up, obviously things aren't as she expects. But not only that, she has also, like, these people keep trying to tell her that she was actually going to this different settlement, not where she knew she was going. As you can expect, as we get further in the book and more things are revealed, as she starts remembering things, more things are revealed and more problems start coming up. And I think that, in my opinion, that this is really well done. I will say that I know that this book is not going to be the book for everyone. I've already seen some pretty negative things from people who, like, I respect the reviews, but I'm just like, this is my type of book, basically. I like the sci-fi elements. I like the sort of fantasy elements thrown in as well. I also really like the humor that was brought in by one of the characters, Finn. And I know he was doing it as a coping mechanism, but I really appreciated it because it kind of broke up all the really serious, scary moments, because there was quite a bit of that, and he was kind of there for the comic relief. There was just so many different aspects about the story that I like, and I think mostly it's because I enjoy the way these two authors put together a story, and the way everything is set up and how everything comes together. I just really enjoy, and I will probably read anything that these two put out. This was another one that I did listen to the audiobook for. I'm kind of glad that I just listened to the audiobook, because if you guys didn't know, just like with their Illuminate audiobooks, with that entire series, this was a full cast with sound effects for different things that was happening, and I felt like that kind of made it almost a cinematic experience with without the actual picture, and I think that made me enjoy the story so much more for my first time around reading. So yeah, like I said, 5 out of 5 stars, my highest rated book for my second half of the month reading. I am really excited with all the books that I read during the second half of the month. I will be doing a separate video for my Newts wrap up. That's all I have for you guys for this video. Let me know what some of the books that you finished in August were, and yeah, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you would like to see more from me, make sure you subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you again in the next one. Bye.